Cameron Ellis stepped out of his immaculate silver Aston Martin, the neon lights of downtown Manhattan glinting off its polished chrome. The soft click of the door behind him was lost in the hum of the evening city. It had been another day of endless meetings, negotiations, and strategic games, all blending into the same familiar routine that had built his billion-dollar empire, but left his life curiously hollow. He tugged at the cuffs of his perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his thoughts already drifting toward the event he was expected at later that evening, the Whitmore Foundation Gala. The annual fundraiser was the crown jewel of New York's social calendar. It was the night when the city's most powerful and privileged flaunted their wealth, influence, and carefully crafted reputations beneath the chandeliers of the Met Grand Hall. But this year, Cameron wasn't just attending to shake hands and sign checks. She would be there, Sophia Whitmore, the woman who had once promised him forever, only to walk away from their engagement 6 months ago. She had traded him in for Vincent Armand, heir to an old money fortune and a name spoken with reverence among their elite circles, but a man Cameron privately thought lacked both substance and vision. It shouldn't have mattered, and yet it did. Cameron had no intention of walking into that ballroom alone. More than pride was at stake. He wanted to defy expectation, to shake the rigid predictability of the life people believed he led. He needed someone unexpected at his side, someone who would make people look twice, someone who would challenge him, even unsettle him. He wasn't sure where the idea first sparked. Maybe it was impulse, or boredom, or something else entirely. But as his Italian leather shoes struck the damp pavement of an alley shortcut on his way home, his eyes caught an unusual sight. She sat in the shadowed entryway of a closed bookstore. Her back rested against weathered brick, her knees drawn up to her chest, shielding herself from the chill. She didn't beg. She didn't plead for loose change or cast hopeful glances at the wealthy pedestrians who rushed by. Instead, she read. The book in her hands was worn, its cover faded and spine cracked from countless readings. Her fingers, slender though streaked with grime, turned each page with care, reverence even, as though it was the last beautiful thing left in her world. Cameron stopped, and for a man like him, who never stopped for anything without a reason, it was extraordinary. For a moment, he simply watched her. There was a quiet dignity about her, one that stood in stark contrast to the circumstances she was clearly enduring. Her features, partially obscured by tangled hair, were calm, focused. There was no trace of the vacant, hollow stare he had come to expect from those who lived on the margins. Instead, there was presence. She must have sensed him watching. Slowly, she lifted her gaze, locking eyes with his. They were an arresting shade, somewhere between amber and hazel, reflective, intelligent. There was no fear in them. No, just curiosity. And just like that, the idea was no longer a flicker. It became a decision. What if I took her to the gala? Cameron thought. Could he bring this woman, this stranger from the streets, into his world and transform her into someone who belonged? Would anyone guess who she had been before? Would anyone care? Or would she defy them all? He approached her slowly, conscious of the absurdity of his own thought. But it wasn't absurd to him. It was a challenge, one he had no intention of backing down from. Would you come with me? He asked. Her expression didn't change. She tilted her head slightly, as though considering his words the way she might the sentences in her book. When she spoke, her voice was low, even, controlled. Why? No inquietud, no suspicion. Just curiosity. And for reasons he couldn't explain, Cameron respected her all the more for it. Because, he said, I think you might surprise everyone. She studied him for another moment. Then, closing the book with deliberate care, she rose to her feet. In the dim light, he saw it. Beneath the dirt, beneath the exhaustion, there was a striking grace to her. High cheekbones, a long neck, the posture of someone who had once lived a different life. He opened the car door for her, offering her an escape. A gamble. Without hesitation, she stepped inside. He slid in after her. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the shadows behind. A new beginning. The ride to his penthouse was quiet, punctuated only by the smooth hum of the engine. Cameron studied her reflection in the tinted glass window. She sat still, hands folded neatly in her lap, her gaze calm. She didn't marvel at the luxurious leather seats or the gleaming console. She didn't fidget. She simply was. When they arrived at the entrance to his building, an architectural marvel of minimalist design and subtle opulence, the doorman barely registered surprise. Cameron Ellis bringing home a woman was hardly unusual, but this woman was different. As they rode the private elevator to the top floor, he gave her space. He wasn't sure what he was doing, whether this was madness or genius, but he couldn't walk away from it now. He gestured toward the guest wing when they arrived, told her where she could clean up, gave her time, and when she emerged over an hour later, the transformation began. Her name, she told him, was Arya Blake. Was it her real name? He wasn't sure. It didn't matter. Clean now, her skin glowed with a deep bronze warmth. Her hair, freed from tangles, hung in loose waves. She wore the white robe he had left for her, cinched neatly at her waist. And she carried herself not like a rescued woman, but like a queen returning from exile. Cameron felt his pulse shift. This wasn't just an act. This was something else. The transformation. The next day, Cameron took her shopping. At a Claw, the boutique known for dressing royalty and billionaires. She walked through the displays as though she'd once owned them all. The assistants, normally cool and professional, were drawn to her presence. They brought dress after dress, measured her, styled her. And when she stood in front of the mirror in an emerald silk gown that hugged her curves and shimmered beneath the spotlights, she didn't smile. She simply was, like she had always been that woman. Her nails were polished, her hair expertly styled. Her makeup was minimal but perfect. By evening, standing on his penthouse balcony, she looked over the skyline with a glass of red wine, silent, as if in contemplation of the empire she once ruled. When he asked her about her past, she told him. Arya had once been the CEO of Valence Capital, a name whispered with reverence and fear in boardrooms across America. She had built her empire as a woman of color in an industry that rewarded anything but. And she had won, until they decided she shouldn't. Betrayals, false accusations, frozen assets. She had been destroyed not by failure, but by men who couldn't bear her success. And she had survived. The gala. The night of the Whitmore Gala arrived like a thunderstorm about to break. The ballroom was alive with the city's most powerful. Men in tuxedos that cost more than most homes. Women draped in couture and diamonds. But when Cameron entered with Arya at his side, time seemed to stop. She wore the emerald gown, her skin radiant under the chandeliers, her bearing regal without arrogance. She was stunning, but it wasn't just beauty that caught the room's attention. It was power, silent, unapologetic. Sophia Whitmore noticed first. Her expression flickered. The careful mask of control nearly slipped as she watched Cameron, her former fiancé, smile with genuine warmth at the woman beside him. And when he introduced Arya to Sophia, there was no hesitation. Arya extended her hand, cool, poised, and looked at Sophia as though she were no more important than a piece of art in the background. But the real test came when the men who had destroyed her life realized who she was. Richard Lemaire, David Carlton, and Robert Sinclair. They saw her, and they paled. They whispered. They speculated. But Arya didn't confront them. She didn't need to. Her very presence was an act of defiance. She moved through the room as though she still owned it. And slowly she did. The reckoning. Over the next days and weeks, Cameron made his move. With Arya's quiet guidance, his team uncovered everything. Evidence of fraud, corruption, and conspiracy that had left her in ruins. And they exposed it. Sinclair fell first. Then Lemaire. Then Carlton. Arya stood before a summit of industry leaders weeks later and told her story. Not with anger, but with facts and strength. By the time she finished, the world saw her not as a fallen CEO, but as a visionary leader wronged by the very system she had once conquered. A future reclaimed. Opportunities came flooding in. Offers of partnerships. seats on boards. But Arya wasn't interested in returning to their world. She was building her own. And Cameron, once a man who believed power was everything, now understood what it meant to stand beside someone powerful in their own right. Not as a trophy, but as an equal. On the balcony of his penthouse, the city below them alive with possibility, Cameron asked her to stay. And for the first time in a long time, Arya Blake made a choice for herself. She chose him, not because she needed him, but because she wanted him. And together, they built something new,